I share my school's vision, which is empowering learners to explore, discover, create, and share. And so I live it also as a school leader. And so I got into this initiative because I didn't really know a lot about special education. And there are a lot of very challenging cases that would come through our door because our students come from all over the world. Just taking a look at every one and how each place writes it differently, how the vocabulary and the context is so different from different places. It led me to need to explore, discover, create, and then share. So when I look at my vision for our school campus is that we are all living this vision of exploring, discovering, creating, and sharing, and also a space of continuous improvement and development so that we can better meet the needs of the students who are on our campus.
When I hear leadership for equity and excellence, I do feel pressure. Pressure to be sure that I'm intentional and purposeful about my student-centered decision-making. It's a good pressure, a steady pressure. I think, it's there, it's constant. That am I thinking about all? Am I asking everybody that works with me, that works with our children to think about all? Yeah, it can make for uncomfortable conversation. But we also talk about if we identify ourselves as an ohana here, as a family. Families have hard conversations for the betterment of the family.
I think an essential quality for leadership at an inclusive school is the belief that all students are general education students first. That we take a look at exactly what they need and then align the resources to what students need. And we know, especially at our school, that students come and go, and the cohorts of students come and go, and the composition of different groups changes, sometimes even as frequently as throughout the school year. And then that's where we have to also, second quality would be to be flexible, because things are always changing and supports are always changing, and people need to be able to make the shift and think flexibly about ways to problem solve and meet the needs of students who happen to be on your campus at that time. I definitely think the first step in developing an inclusive school is a common understanding of what inclusive practices are for the entire campus. And it's not a special education piece, it's not an educational assistant piece, it is for the entire campus. So what are inclusive practices? How do we meet the needs of students? How do we resource our personnel? And I think when you keep reiterating the same belief or system or process over and over and over again, then it really helps to bring everybody onto the same page.
Well, the very first step for me as a leader was believing that we could make it happen. Next step was we need a clear mission and vision, a common understanding of what our inclusion model is, what inclusive education sounds like, looks like, feels like. We have to start there because that's what continues to ground us when presenting it to new faculty and staff, or when talking with parents, right? Going back to, here's our mission and vision. Here's what we believe about inclusion. So this is why we're going to have this conversation, because this is what we believe in.
When there are some individuals who are resistant to inclusive practices, sometimes they've had a bad experience with it, or they think that you just shove kids in a gen ed class because that's inclusion, even if it may not be the most appropriate place for them. And so that's where I think when we take it to a third point, which is our Forms 1 and Forms 2, it takes it off of this interpersonal conflict piece to looking at data to make our decisions. And when you look at where can the students' goals be met in the school day, Can they do the curriculum as it's written, or do they need additional support? And when you work through that process with people, it helps them to think about inclusive practices in a different way, where they might have been hindered from a prior experience.
I'm not doing it alone. And so along the way, there's people there to help me, or I see people's expertise, their gifts, where they're gonna be able to shine and help us shine and build their capacity. Then come along, here we go. Because the vision is there. It's like nailing versus lashing. Like I can nail this, I'm gonna nail this into you. It's gonna be this way. We are an inclusive school. We have an inclusion model. This is our mission and vision. You will do it. Be compliant. When we think about lashing, like on a canoe of ropes, right? And this is wood. And when it's lashed, there's give, right? So there's tension enough to keep it together, but then there's also some give. So over time, right? Just over time. Nailing, yeah, of course they'll be compliant as much as they can with a little bit of attitude because they're being compliant because Principal Almanza said so. But I want the commitment piece, and I think that comes more with the lashing. Let me lash this idea onto you. Let me lash this new perspective onto you. Might I lash this book study to you?
In my leadership journey to understanding and implementing inclusive practices on our school campus, I think some of my greatest learning is really actually seeing how we have probably been providing too much close proximity to students on many occasions by just saying, okay, here's 2 bodies, stick them in that room, here's 2 bodies, stick them in that room. But when you come to a situation like our school did at one point, where we had 20 students coming up from pre-K, the 2 body in one kinder room, it doesn't really work anymore. And when you see the levels of support that some students require, you really start to ask yourself, why do they need 2 bodies for a whole full school day? So I think what I've been learning most about is just really diving a little deeper to seeing what a student is capable of, and then looking at how do we really align supports to meet their needs, rather than just divvying out people and assigning students to them. I think to me that has been probably the biggest shift.
Some of my greatest learning has definitely been in terms of systems and the forms, Form 1 and Form 2, right? To really, the Form 1 and Form 2 and building the healthy clusters, wow, maybe just made me feel a lot more confident in as its principal to say, indeed, that's the class list. And to be able to speak to it, to say, no, we put some serious conversation, time, blood, sweat, and tears into this, right? These lists, right? Building these healthy clusters.
I think for me, my next big step is to be able to continue to develop that same school-wide professional development every single school year in the way that it was provided to us over these last few years. Our faculty and staff turns over often, and we need to continually bring everybody onto the same page, and then to continue to reinforce our beliefs over and over and over again, so that it does not become a fading initiative or something we once did in the past. And so for me, that's probably my next big step.
I often just think about what is the value added? How am I adding value to anybody's life who passes through this school? Academically, behaviorally, socially, emotionally, in all ways. Total well-being, all things. How are we adding value? I don't want to be taken away. How are we adding?